screen. All right, everybody ready? Okay, 5 steps to building a reliable, enthusiastic, and committed volunteer team. So the first things we're going to do, we're going to just quickly go over what we're going to do this for the next hour or so. So we're going to cover who this is for, because nobody has a ton of time to waste. So if what we're going to talk about doesn't suit you, then I get it. A little bit about me, and then what we're going to do, and the key word is we. We're going to be, this is going to be interactive. You guys are going to be doing things. If you have not printed out the worksheet that I sent, don't worry too much about it. It's a really easy diagram. So I'm sure everybody can draw it out. So, and then we'll go through the 5 steps to building your volunteer team. I will, for about a minute or so, and literally I will keep this very short, some of the services that I offer, and then a question and answer period. Feel free to ask questions as we go through. At the end of each segment, I'm going to stop and ask if anyone wants or anyone has questions, and you can go from that point. Okay, who this is for. So basically, this is for leaders who are having these types of problems. They can't get enough qualified volunteers. They can't fill certain volunteer roles. So they get a ton of people in for one thing, but nobody wants to touch another. Volunteers who cancel shifts, who with little or no notice. Basically, your volunteers aren't terribly reliable. Volunteers who work for a month and then disappear, lack of commitment with your volunteers. Mistakes being made, or you're so worried about your volunteers making mistakes that you end up doing everything yourself. Gaps or gluts in your scheduling. So sometimes you find that you have way more volunteers than you can possibly put to use, and then the next day you don't have enough to get the job done. Other tasks being neglected because because running the volunteer program takes up so much of your time that other things that you need to do get put aside. And dealing with conflict between your volunteers or between volunteers and staff, stuff that takes away from advancing your mission. So basically any leader of volunteers who would rather have a reliable, enthusiastic, and committed team of volunteers. So who am I, and who am I to talk to you about this? I have led volunteers for over 25 years. I've been a volunteer, I've been on boards of directors, I've been a volunteer coordinator, I've been a district director. At one point I had 20 people reporting directly to me. I was running a program that had 20 people, and they had another about 80 people reporting to them. And we were all volunteers. So basically, I've been there, done that, if you want to put it that way. Okay, so my basic way of looking at things is volunteers, I have a strategic volunteer management system. And it's kind of a 4-stage process that starts with recruitment and then moves on to training and onboarding, management, and then review, so program review, and then of course back to recruitment. But all of this takes place in an atmosphere or an environment of overt appreciation and respect for the volunteer. So what we're going to do, if you've got your worksheet printed out, grab that in front of you. If you don't, grab a pen and paper and just draw a big heart with 5 circles in it. So we're going to do you are going to do a self-assessment of your specific organization, your own volunteer program in those 5 areas just mentioned. Excuse me. So if you don't have it, draw it out, grab a pen, and then label each of the circles. So the one in the center, is appreciation. Your upper right is recruitment. Your lower right is training. Your lower left is management. And your upper left is program review. Now, if you like coloring, you can get crayons because we're going to fill in those circles using a traffic light analogy. So if you've come to a dead stop, things aren't working, you'll be filling in these circles with red. If you're doing okay, but you know there's a lot of improvement, in yellow. If you've got this aced, you know exactly what you're doing, you fill in the circle with green. Or if you'd rather not color or you don't have any markers with you, just write it in red, green, yellow. Okay, are there any questions? I'm going to just quickly go through. Okay, all right. So at the end of it, it might look something like this. Okay, so we're going to start in the center of the circle. So appreciation is the key to having a good volunteer program. So we know how much we value our volunteers, but they need to know that we know it. So a continuous, overt show of appreciation is kind of the air that our volunteers breathe. Without it, they're gone, right? I remember a program I was with when I was also a volunteer. I wasn't running the program, and it was at a hospice, and the people were good. They were friendly. Everything was laid out well. We were well trained, but they just never said thank you. I mean, it sounds so obvious, but they just never thought to actually say anything. We never felt appreciated, and they had a really hard time with retention. People would just leave because they didn't feel appreciated. So if you want a reliable, enthusiastic, and committed volunteer team, you have to say thank you and show thank you. Don't just say it. And you can't do it enough. So I figure there's 4 ways that a volunteer leader should show appreciation. And the first one is informal thank yous. So how often do you say thank you? How specific are you? Do you talk to them? I mean, I recommend to my clients that they thank every volunteer, every shift. Every volunteer, every shift should get a thank you from at least one person on the staff. And be specific. If you can, talk about something you saw them do that day. So don't just say, hey, great job. I mean, that's good if you don't have anything more specific, but you could say, hey, I saw you talking with this client, and it was obvious they were really really appreciative of you listening, and I thank you for that. So just show that you've been watching and that you actually do see what they're doing. Thanking them is great, but sometimes when a volunteer goes above and beyond, you want to do something a little more tangible. Even something as simple as a $5 coffee cart or something like that. And it doesn't need to cost money. It could be something as simple as being a job reference, or I was running a program once, and I was putting on quite a large event, and I had a lot of volunteers, and we were bringing in a keynote speaker, and it turned out that one of my best volunteers was a huge fan of this speaker. So rather than me going to the airport to pick the guy up and bring him to the venue, I had Joe do it, and he got to spend a half hour one-on-one with one of his heroes. I mean, it was just so easy, and it made him feel so good. So simple things, find tangible ways to say thank you. Public acknowledgement. This is where you don't just say thank you to them, but you tell other people how much you appreciate it. This can be bringing it up at the AGM or posting stuff on social media about them. I mean, get their permission first, of course, because not everybody wants their name all over the internet. But if they do, go for it. It can be a huge way. I'm going to go through a couple of slides that'll show you what some other organizations have done. Just simple things like this. This isn't my Joe, by the way. This is a different Joe. But just here, this is what this guy does, a little bit about him. A group picture of people doing something, helping out, having a good time, showing what they're doing, helping in what they're building, what the volunteers actually do. All of our volunteers, thank all of your volunteers and show pictures and things like that. Bring out a specific one, like a volunteer of the month or something like that. Or focus on their milestones, so many years of service or so many hours of service, and bring that out. It's all quite simple stuff. It helps them feel really appreciated. And there's a side benefit to that too, is if you can show your volunteers having fun and show everybody that you appreciate them, it spreads the word that your place is a good place to volunteer. Okay. The fourth one for this is appreciation events. And most of us have thought of this or do that, is if we have a big group, we have a dinner dance or a potluck or a barbecue or something like that. Find out from your volunteers what they want. Do they want a big splashy event, or do they want something more low key and just talk amongst themselves? Be creative about it. I heard about one where they had, they called them the event, the Baseball All-Stars. And they were in a town that had a Major League Baseball team. And they got permission to have a party at the stadium, so they could go and have a tour of the stadium. They got to meet one or two baseball players. They each got a baseball card with their face and name and the stats of their volunteering, what they do, what their role is, all that sort of thing. And I thought it was such a brilliant idea, something a little bit different, but that made a huge difference to their volunteers. Okay, so now it's your turn. Consider your volunteer program. So how appreciated do your volunteers feel? Do you even know? Have you asked them? Do you think you appreciate your volunteers often enough? Do you use all different ways to show your appreciation? Basically, and is appreciation kind of a part of your culture? Like, do you show appreciation to your staff, to your board, to your clients, to all your stakeholders? Okay, so take the center circle and mark it with either red, yeah, we have tons of work to do in this area. Yellow, we're doing okay, but we can improve. Or green, hey, we've got this nailed, we're right on top of it. So I'll give you a minute to do that. And I will say that this is the most important area. If you can only work on one point, work on appreciation. Are there any questions?
Yes. How would you do a volunteer appreciation event during COVID?
There are different ways. You can have an in-person event if it's in a big enough place. Like if you had this ball stadium thing, you can do that without getting people really close. You can social distance and the rest of it, if you have a big enough area to do it. If not, it's a virtual event. You can find different ways to have big events. Research it. If you go on Google, they have all sorts of different ways of doing it. You can have keynote speakers come in, breakout rooms where people can chat one-on-one with each other. Just be creative. Outdoor events are better. If you can do an outdoor event, if your weather's warm enough. You can't do it here in Kamloops, we've got a foot of snow, so that doesn't always work, but try and find some ways to do it in person. In person is better if you can, but obviously safety comes first. And if you can't be social distanced and keep things safe, then doing it online is the better way to do it. Any other questions? Okay, we will go on then to recruitment. How do we get all these volunteers we need to appreciate? So if you find that your volunteers are burning out because you end up using the same people over and over again, or you find yourself scrambling at the last minute to fill shifts, or filling shifts, I've seen this a lot, filling shifts with people you know aren't all that they need to be or all trained the way you want them, but hey, you need a warm body. So anyone, if you've ever had to cancel a program or an event because you couldn't get enough volunteers, and I've seen that happen, you need to develop an effective recruitment strategy and implement it consistently. And that starts with preparing. Be prepared before you go out and actually recruit. Is what are the roles they need that you're looking for? Are they well balanced? Do they have a mix of really fun things to do and some of the things that aren't quite so pleasant? If you mix them up, then you won't have this break between lots of people wanting to do one role and nobody wanting to touch the other. So if you can kind of mix them together, it'll make it easier. Have a description, just like a job description, laid out, and then have a list of tasks. Know what each volunteer is going to do. I volunteered once at a museum, and I was brought on, did all the stuff, and then my first day I showed up ready for my shift, and the person in charge looked at me blankly and had no idea I was coming, had no idea what I was supposed to do, and got me doing some sort of make work project that didn't really need to be done. And I thought, okay, well, that's fine. I mean, it's first day, she was surprised, blah, blah, blah. And my second shift was exactly the same. No idea I was coming. No, the third shift, when the third shift happened exactly the same way, I quit because they weren't ready for me. They had nothing for me to do. They had no idea it was coming or anything. There is nothing that will lose you your volunteers faster than making them feel that they're more of a hassle than a help. And that's how I felt at that museum. So be prepared. When you are prepared, spread the word. Get everybody out there. How do you spread the word for your volunteer program? How do you get your information out there? What methods do you use? Where are you looking for your volunteers? Do you just post on social media, or do you use a whole bunch of different channels? Is there any other way you can make the application process easier so people are wanting to come in? So find all the different ways, from word of mouth to social media to posters up to events, whatever. Use your current volunteers as ambassadors to bring people in. So think about all the different ways that you can spread the word. Then do your interviews. When the applications come in, do your interviews. Know where you want to place them and find out if they are the right fit for that particular role. If you're looking for one particular role, make sure that they suit that role. What skills do they have? Why did they volunteer? And why did they volunteer with you? Understanding where they come from will go a long way towards bringing them towards you finding a place that will fit for them so that they're happy and will stay longer. Interview volunteers basically like you would staff, right? Look for the same things. And if I can give one piece of advice, hire for attitude rather than skill. Even if someone has all the skills they want, if they're not reliable, if they're not enthusiastic about doing it, they're the wrong people. It's better to get someone who is enthusiastic and willing to learn, because then they'll stick around. You can train for skill, you can't train for attitude. So that's the biggest takeaway for recruitment is this: hire for or bring on for attitude, not for skill. And finally, select the best. Be picky. You don't want to be going through a revolving door. So be really picky. Trust your gut. Is this person the right fit? Right. And of course, go through all the training and or the checks and everything in there as well. And I really do mean pick the best, and not just someone who seems good. I brought on a volunteer for a fairly major role at one time, and he seemed great. He was enthusiastic, he was friendly, he seemed really knowledgeable, but he was also involved in 3 other not-for-profit agencies, and they had more priority than this position did. On top of that, he had health issues. And so by partway into the program that we were running, he was gone more often than he was there. And the program was falling behind because of that. So I had to replace him. It felt bad because he was so good, so friendly when he was there, but he wasn't there enough. And had I done my interviews better, and had I been more picky about the selection, I wouldn't have had that problem. So be willing to be picky. Okay, now it's your turn again. How are you guys doing on recruitment? You know you have a great recruitment system when you have more quality volunteers than you know what to do with, so you can expand your program. If you're struggling to find enough people, or if you have a few bad apples that kind of spoil the culture, you might be a red. If you're kind of in between, you're a yellow. So take a moment and figure out where you think you are in terms of your volunteer program. Are there any questions? I hope I'm not going through this too fast. I can't see anybody's face with the screen up, so I'm assuming this is making sense to everybody. If you have any questions, let me know. Just gonna check. This is good. I'm seeing in the chat that people are putting through a drive-through with goodie bags. Isn't that a wonderful idea for a virtual thank you event? What else? Doing an outdoor event. Also did a PowerPoint video and staff saying thank you. That's good. Is have all the staff say thank you. Another thing is get your clients to say thank you. If you can, if you have specific clients, say, hey, I just want to thank so-and-so who's been working with me the last while. Things like that can really touch people's hearts, because it shows them the line between what they're doing and the clients themselves, that they're actually making a difference. Facebook Live ceremony, that's good. Don't know. Adrienne said she used Memento to have staff record thank yous to volunteers. I don't know what Memento is. I'm going to get you to tell me more about that later. I'm going to write that down. Okay, and delivered meals to our volunteers for the holidays. That's a lovely thing. And a breakfast drive-through. This is great. We're getting lots of good comments. Okay. All right. If there are no questions, I'm going to go on to the next level, which is management, or is training. Sorry, missed a step. So we got to set up your volunteers for success. Okay. So poor training, or in some cases no training at all, leads to poor quality. It leads to overworked staff, including you, and high turnover. People want to feel like they know what they're doing. So if you train them well, then they feel like they can be successful in their role. But if you find that volunteers aren't following procedures, or they're doing stuff, but they're not doing it the way it needs to be done, when they feel like they're not doing a good job, volunteers will leave because they want to help. I remember a client of mine had a volunteer, it was another hospice thing, and they were making beds, but they weren't making beds the way they were supposed to. And so they left a crease in the lower bed sheet, and the client ended up with bed sores. So the volunteer was heartbroken that they had caused that, and quit because they didn't feel they were any good at it. But it could have come back down to training, that they just weren't shown how and given enough time to become good at it before problems started. So you just work on your training and onboarding. And the first step to that is making them feel part of a team. So part of the training and onboarding is making sure that they know that they're part of the group. Everybody wants to belong. So encourage them to be part of the team. Make sure that they have links to whatever sites, volunteer sites you have, or make sure if you have t-shirts or uniforms or hats or whatever, make sure they get one so that they can feel part of the group. And the sooner you can do this, the more committed they'll become. Discuss how their role impacts the mission. And this is huge because people volunteer with you because they want to make a difference. And if they find they're just doing some random stuff and they can't see how that furthers the mission, then they're not going to be happy with it and they won't stick around. So draw a clear line, even if it's something like filing or cleaning out the storeroom or whatever. Draw a line to show why doing that makes a difference to the mission. If the filing's not done, we can't find things, it takes longer, and we have less time for client care, for example. Right? So be able to draw a clear line. And if you can't draw a line between what you have your volunteers doing and how it furthers the mission, then you need to be asking yourself why your volunteers are doing it in the first place. Step 3, demonstrate all tasks and provide a handbook. It's common for people who've done something for a long time to think, oh, this is self-explanatory. Back years and years ago, before I got into this industry, I was working in an office once, and I was training somebody on simple office procedures. And I noticed whenever she did the date stamp on it, and this was, like I said, this was a long time ago, we actually had physical date stamps that had to go on the paper. And I noticed that the dates were every which way. Sometimes they were upside down, sometimes they were sideways. It was never just straight up and down. And so I asked her, and she said, well, how do you know? And I didn't realize that I hadn't told her that the flat side of the handle on a stamp goes toward you. And that way it's always the right way up. It just seems so self-explanatory because I'd done it for so long. It didn't even occur to me to teach it. So look really carefully. If you run a soup kitchen, for example, make sure everybody knows how to run the industrial size dishwasher, right? Simple things that may fly under the radar for you. Take a really close look. So demonstrate everything. And provide a handbook, because nobody will remember everything at once. So they'll need something to refer back to. And speaking of remembering everything at once, teach large roles over time. If there's a lot of training to be done, I have a friend who's a manager at an SPCA, and I remember seeing somebody here with the SPCA. They have a ton of things to train a new volunteer to do. And because of that, it's easy for people to feel fire hosed. They get all this information and they can only take in a certain amount of it. And when they're done the training, they'll retain 10%, 25%. But the scary thing is you don't know what they've retained and what they haven't. If you break up that training into little pieces and teach one a day or one a shift or whatever, then number one, they still only know a certain amount until I get to the end, but you know what they already know and what they still haven't learned, so that you're not going to be surprised if something goes wrong. And finally, assign a mentor, assign someone for them to job shadow, someone for them to ask questions if you're not around. Make sure that they know they're not alone. That mentor may be you. If you're there all the time, that mentor could be you, but just someone for them to fall back on, especially if you've got a job where, or a role where things can really be life and death. If you're in a homeless shelter and people need anti-overdose medication, you need to be able to provide that. That can be really scary if you've been trained but have never actually watched somebody else do it in a real life situation. So have them job shadow someone, and it'll make them feel a lot more confident. Okay, so how are you guys doing? What's your training program like with your volunteer program? Good training leads to confident, capable volunteers and a lot less stress for you. So fill in that lower right-hand circle with how you think you're doing. So organizations that are green have documented procedures, clear lines between the task and the mission. They assign mentors and they quickly make their volunteers feel part of the organization. And then, so where are you guys? And if anybody has any questions, just let me know. Summer wrote in regards to the last slide that they have so much interest in volunteering at games, the fun jobs, but recruiting for committees, all the organizing and stuff like that aren't fun jobs, and being shut down for 2 years has been hard to get people going. So yeah, having people on committees, it can be done. But another thing you can do besides just balancing out the jobs is look for people who are interested in that sort of thing. There's a lot of people who are introverts who don't want to be front and center at the Derby, for example. So having someone who's quiet and willing to just sit down and be part of the planning can help. So watch for introverts when you're doing your recruiting. They may be really good candidates for committee work. Yeah, it was Adrian who is in the SPCA. Yeah, people often get frustrated. They have to be trained, but once they get actually started, they see why it's necessary. That's very true.
Do you have any recommendations for how I can explain that, like in a sort of short way to volunteers of like, I know that you can walk a dog at home, but this is a very different setting, or if like any sort of little what you said about, the importance of training volunteers so they're capable and competent. It's great for staff, but I think if I said that to someone, they might feel a bit offended.
Use stories in your training. Talk about when a dog that a volunteer was walking got into a fight with another dog, or got away from them and ended up in the street and hit by a car. Tell stories that illustrate what happens if they don't follow the procedures that you do, right? Yeah, it's easy. Yeah, you just snap a leash on and go out, but it doesn't work that way, especially if you're dealing with dogs that are rescued that may have emotional issues or anything like that. If you tell stories and show illustrations on why, people tend to be a lot more open to learning. Does that help?
Yeah, definitely. That's great. Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, now this is where the rubber hits the road. Let's herd some cats. Management. Now, management in many ways is closely related to training, because poor management leads to poor quality work. It leads to mistakes and problems. So there's kind of 6 things that I look at in terms of management. And the first one's supervision. Basically, are your volunteers following procedures? Are they quickly made? If you have a change in procedure, are you letting them know right away about that? Communication and accessibility are key to supervision. Make sure everybody knows what's going on. Over communicate rather than under communicate. People might roll their eyes if you say something the 4th time, but it's better than not saying it enough and it getting missed. And be available to them if they have questions. If something happens, they need to know where to get in touch with you, whether that be virtually or in person. They need to know where you are, and that they're able to get in touch with you as much as they can. Have a text in case you're in meetings or whatever. So if something urgent comes up, you can be reached. So communication and accessibility are the key to good supervision. Scheduling. This is where the gluts and gaps in your volunteer come in. Do you have a system to keep track of when the volunteers are coming in, how many hours they spend, all that sort of thing? How far in advance do you schedule people out? If you find people aren't showing up to shifts, is it because you haven't given them enough leeway, or given them too much leeway so they've forgotten in between? So look at your scheduling, figure out how you can do that. Choose a scheduling software that suits your organization. If you're a small grassroots type organization, something as simple as a spreadsheet and an email system might be all you need. If you're a big organization with multiple departments and all this, you may need some high-end, expensive volunteer management software. And believe me, there's tons of them out there, hundreds of them. And some of them are really reasonably priced and geared towards smaller non-for-profits. And some of them are expensive, a couple $100 a month to run, and would be great if you're the Red Cross or some international large organization. It might be necessary for you to have things like that. So have a look at what your needs are in terms of a scheduling program, and put that in place. Like I said, whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or a large software program. Delegation. This is actually something that a lot of not-for-profits have problems with, is delegating to their volunteers. They'll delegate tasks. They'll say, oh, can you do this or that, and that's great. But they will seldom feel comfortable delegating responsibility. Can you be in charge of this? That's a harder one to do, but it's something that can save you a massive amount of time if you can really become good at delegating. And there's kind of 4 or 5 different things that you need to give to somebody if you're going to delegate. And the first one, of course, are an outcome. This is what I want it to look like when it's finished, whether that's you're getting them to arrange a meeting or whatever. These are the outcomes that I want from what you do. Deadlines. This is when it needs to be done by, and these are the deadlines if it's a big one, these are the deadlines that I need to know how far you've gone. So by Tuesday, I need to know that this meeting has been arranged. The meeting will be on Thursday, but I need to know by Tuesday so I can book time off or whatever. Support. You need to say that you encourage them, that you're there for them. If they have questions, if they need anything else, then you need to do that. Resources. And resources can be, access to a computer, or it can be finances. It could also be time. If you're delegating to somebody who already has a big role, you may need to take some of that role off and give it to a different person so that they have time to focus on the new task. And finally, freedom. Just get out of their way. And this is the hard part, is people, I'll delegate to you, but I'm going to watch every move you make, right? That doesn't work. because it doesn't give them the self-confidence, and you'll end up not saving time, and you'll get to the point where well, I might as well just do it myself, right? And I'm sure we have all hit that pain point at one time where oh, I won't bother delegating, it's faster just to do it myself. And that may be fine for a one-off thing, but if it's something that you're going to have to do repeatedly, take the time to train somebody in advance. Now, before the program started, I was talking that in the past, I'm a trained cabinet maker. I build furniture for a living, and one thing we often did is if we had something, an action that we had to do repeatedly, cut a certain angle on a board or whatever, we would do something, we'd make a jig. It's called a jig. It's just a little thing that helps us do it. It's just a little thing that we build that will set that angle perfectly for us so that we can use it every time without measuring in each individual board. Now, it takes time to build those jigs to get them just right. And if you're doing it just once or twice, it may not be worth that time. But if you're going to cut 100 boards and need that exact angle on every one, a jig is the only way to go. Yes, it takes time to put it together, but it saves you a lot of time in the long run. The same thing with delegation. If you can take the time to build something or train somebody really well and delegate well to them so that they build up the confidence and their skills in doing that, you'll save a ton of time in the long run. Problem solving. There is a huge fallacy out there about the leader needs to be the one who solves the problem, right? If you have a problem, you go to the leader solves it. It doesn't work that way. If you're the smart, there's a lovely quote. I just love this quote. If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. If you are a good leader, you surround yourself with people who have skills that you don't have. Your volunteers may know things that you don't know, and that's a good thing. So encourage your volunteers when they come to you with an issue to also come to you with their idea to solve that issue. Right? Get them to start thinking for themselves. Develop a culture of self, develop a culture where everybody solves problems. And someone can come to you and say, hey, I've noticed this happening. I think it would be better if we did this. Rather than, I noticed something happening, what should we do? And that way you harness in everybody's skills, and then you end up with better solutions. Because if all the solutions come from one person, everybody has blind spots and you may miss things. Your volunteers are the ones actually doing things, and they may have better ideas. So encourage them to come to you with solutions. Become a problem solver. The whole group becomes a problem solving team. Diversity. This is something that's hugely important to me. I come from a family that was extraordinarily bigoted. And when I left my home in a small town in northern British Columbia, and I moved to the big city, my eyes were opened in the most glorious ways. I learned things about people that blew my mind, and changed the entire way I look at people who are different than me, and learned that they're all just people, and it's not terrible. But one thing about it is the more differences that we welcome into our volunteer team, the stronger that team becomes. The more diverse worldviews and perspectives that we can bring in, the better our problem solving, the better we can serve our clients, the faster we can move our mission forward. Because if we all come from the same point of view, we miss so much. Just like a table is stronger if it has 4 legs than if it has 1, right? We want as many different opinions and ideas and thoughts as possible so that we can come up with the best solution. So bring people on who are diverse, who are different from you in age and socioeconomic status, in gender, in culture, in ethnicity, all of that. So the more differences you can bring into your team, the stronger that team will be. Now, there may be conflict because of that, because certain people disagree, but you'll still be stronger in the end. And conflict can be something that leads you forward. Conflict management, we often talk about conflict management as in conflict avoidance. And it doesn't necessarily need to be, and it shouldn't necessarily be that way. Conflict management can be, how can we bring conflict in so that we can see things clearer? If people are always saying, yes, 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 this is wonderful, this is great, you can miss something when somebody sits back and say, that really won't work, but I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to be aggressive or confrontational, so I won't say it. If you encourage people to talk, you don't want hurtful conflict, but somebody who's willing to stand up and say, I don't think that's right, that's a good thing to have. So conflict management isn't just avoiding bad conflict, it's encouraging good conflict. So are you comfortable having hard conversations? What procedures do you have in place for when conflict does come up? Think about those things. And take all of this into consideration and figure where are you in terms of your management skills with your supervision and your delegation and your problem solving. Are you green, yellow, or red? So fill in your lower right or lower left-hand circle. Does anybody have any questions?
I love the herding cats graphic. It's hilarious.
Thank you. I've felt it, believe me. There's a wonderful commercial out. I think it's still on, you can still find it if you Google it. There's this whole commercial about these cowboys herding cats. It was really funny. I haven't watched it in eons, but you can find it on Google if you search herding cats. All right. The last area is review, program review. And this is an area that a lot of volunteer programs don't think about, is to step back on a regular basis and determine what's working and what isn't. Have an idea of what your ideal volunteer program looks like, and then compare what you've got to what that is, and do that on a regular basis. The best volunteer programs in the world still need to be reviewed at least annually. Things come out of nowhere. I mean, COVID, right? Who could have known if what we did 2 years ago won't work now? So if you don't regularly review your volunteer program and figure out what areas are working and what aren't, you're going to be stuck. So look at your appreciation. Are you covering all 4 points? Are you saying thank you to every volunteer every shift? All that sort of thing. How are you doing towards that? And make plans to fill the gaps between where you are now and where you want to be. I mean, there is no such thing as a perfect volunteer program. But if you know what it is, you can work toward it. And the closer you get to it, the better you'll be. Right? Yeah, recruitment. Are you getting enough volunteers? Training. Are your volunteers happy and know what they're doing? Management. Are you getting the volunteers in when you need them? Is your team diverse? So look at all these different things on a regular basis so that you know what you're doing. Okay. So in the upper left-hand corner, fill in how you guys are doing your reviews. How often do you review? Do you have a goal to work toward? Who gets involved in the review? Not conducting regular program reviews can leave you vulnerable. So do it. Find some way to be objective about your program and look at it. So if you haven't done any reviews for a while, you may want to put that in as red. I mean, we've just reviewed your volunteer program, so you've done it today, but prior to today, if it's not something that you normally do, you may want to put that as a red. If you think about it every once in a while, but you don't really take action on it, you may be a yellow. If you regularly review it and implement it, then you're a green. So fill in your little circle, and if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, if there's no questions, we'll go on to the next. And this is, what did you notice? Look at your heart diagram and see what happened. What did you notice? Now I'm going to edit out the next bit, so you don't need to feel uncomfortable, but is anybody willing to share what they found out? Any eye openers, anything that you didn't think about before? This down, you're going to get my my contact information. So if anybody has any questions or anything comes up after that, or they want to talk about it, just let me know. So what I do, this is the salesy part of it, and like I said, I'll try and make it really fast. If you have reds and yellows, this is what I do, is I help you turn those to green. So I'm a consultant. I can come on. I have a number of different programs and different ways that I can help you. So if you're interested, reach out to me to do that. I am also in the process of putting together a certificate of volunteer management program. It'll be a combination of video training, downloadable resources, and one-on-one mentoring with me. So there'll be 6 one-on-one 1-hour calls with me, so we can talk about any issue that you're coming up with, whether it's part of the course or whether it's just something that's happening in your work right now and you need help with it. That'll be coming out within the next month or so, be available. And you know, I here with talking to a lot of people, it's something that's needed. So by the end of it, you'll actually have a working, effective volunteer program designed specifically for your organization, because you're going to be building it through the course of through the progress of the course. So if you're interested in that, you can contact me. My email, which most of you will have anyway, because I sent you guys reminders about the webinar. It's Karen@karenknight.ca, CA because I'm Canadian. My phone number, and yeah, and my website is karenknight.ca. If you want to look up some of my information, don't want to talk to me directly, just want to dive into it on your own, all the information is on my website. So all right, I'm going to stop sharing now.